I spent 5 years helping my parents keep their house. I paid part of their mortgage every month. I covered groceries when they said they were short. I showed up on weekends to fix things, leaky faucets, broken hinges, a water heater that kept dying, instead of calling a repairman because I knew they'd complain about the cost. I never sent an invoice. Never asked for a thank you. I just did it because I thought that's what family does. Then one afternoon, I found their will. And that was the day I realized I wasn't their son. I was their emergency fund. Let me back up. My name's Jake. I'm the older one. I have a steady job, my own apartment, and I've been financially independent since I was 22. My younger brother Eric is 28. He still lives at home. He's been figuring things out for about 6 years now, which in practice means he plays video games until 2 in the morning, sleeps until noon, and occasionally picks up a shift somewhere before deciding the schedule doesn't work for his mental space. I'm not saying that to be cruel. That's just what life with Eric looks like. Every time I tried to bring it up, gently, carefully, the way you do when you know the room, my parents would shut it down. Don't pressure him. He's sensitive. So I stopped bringing it up. What I couldn't stop was the pattern. Eric would fail at something. My parents would call it struggling. I'd be exhausted from a 60-hour work week and need to cancel a visit. They'd call that selfish. I told myself it wasn't intentional, that they didn't see it. That they loved us both, just differently. Just, imperfectly. I believed that for a long time. It was a Tuesday when it fell apart. I drove over to help my dad scan some documents, insurance stuff, old paperwork he couldn't figure out. Normal enough. He stepped out to take a call, and while I was clearing space on his desk I saw a folder. It was labeled, *estate plan / last will and testament. I almost didn't open it. I want to be clear about that, because later my dad would act like I'd gone digging through their things. I almost didn't open it. But, then I thought about the last 5 years. The mortgage payments. The grocery runs. The weekends I gave up. I thought, if anyone has a right to know what's in this folder, it's me. I'm the one who's been keeping this house alive. So I opened it. The house went to Eric. The savings went to Eric. Everything, the accounts, the car, the small investment fund my dad had been building for 20 years, all of it, to Eric. My name appeared once. One line near the bottom, wrapped in language so careful it almost didn't register, * we love both our sons equally. * I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it. But, because part of me was hoping the words would change if I stared long enough. They didn't. My dad came back in and saw the folder open on the desk. He went very still. I looked at him. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. I was just, empty. So this is what I am to you. I said. Good enough to pay for the house. Not good enough to inherit any piece of it. He looked away. Jake, it's complicated. That's when my mom walked in from the kitchen. She must have heard something in my voice, because she came in already composed, already ready. I told her what I'd seen. She didn't look surprised. She looked inconvenienced. You don't need it, she said. Eric does. And there it was. Not an accident. Not an oversight. A decision they'd made, clearly and deliberately, and then said nothing about while I kept showing up every month with my checkbook. I stood there for a moment. I thought I'd feel angry. I thought I'd feel hurt. But, what I actually felt was something quieter. Colder. That was the moment I stopped being angry. Because, anger means you're surprised. And I wasn't surprised anymore. Looking back at 6 years of excuses and double standards and gentle little dismissals, I wasn't surprised at all. I was just done. I put my jacket on, picked up my keys, and left. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't show up to fix anything. I didn't transfer the money I usually sent at the beginning of the month. I went home, sat on my couch, and just let it be quiet. 2 weeks passed. Then my dad texted, * property taxes are due. * I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, * Eric should handle it. It's his house, right? * my mom started calling. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Then another. Then she texted, * Jake, don't be like this. Family helps family. * I replied, * I did help family. For 5 years. Then I found out I wasn't being treated like family. * Then Eric got involved. * Dude, stop being dramatic. It's just money. I wrote back, * great. Then you won't mind paying it. * He didn't reply. A few days later, a payment request came through on my phone. $3,500. From my mom. No message. No explanation. Just the amount, sitting there like an invoice. I looked at it for a second. They weren't asking anymore. They were billing me. I declined the request and put my phone face down. They showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. All 3 of them. My dad, my mom, Eric trailing behind with his hands in his hoodie pocket like he'd rather be anywhere else. I got a text that they were downstairs, so I went down. I didn't invite them up. We stood in the lobby. My mom opened with, "We need to talk." I said, "No. You need money. There's a difference." My dad's jaw tightened. "We raised you. And I helped you for years," I said. But, apparently I was only family when the bills were due. Eric shifted on his feet. "I didn't ask for the house." "No," I said. "You just accepted it while I paid for it." My mom's voice went soft, that particular softness she uses when she wants to sound reasonable. "Family takes care of each other, Jake." I looked at her. "Exactly," I said. "So when was anyone planning to take care of me?" Nobody said anything. I turned around, went back inside, and took the elevator up. That afternoon, I blocked all 3 of them. It took about 48 hours before my mom posted something on Facebook. * Some children forget who raised them. * Then my dad. * We gave everything to our kids. And now one of them has abandoned us. * Then Eric, which honestly was the one that stung the most because of how little he'd ever given. * Real family doesn't make everything about money. * The comments filled up fast. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years chiming in. A few cousins, some aunts, a neighbor who'd known my parents for 2 decades. * Children shouldn't treat their parents this way. * Money isn't worth more than family. * Jake, grow up. I read all of it. I didn't respond to any of it. I sat with it for a few hours, which is longer than I expected, honestly. Then I made a decision. I posted. But, not a wall of emotional text. I posted receipts. Screenshots of every mortgage transfer for the past 5 years. The home repair invoices I'd paid. The grocery runs I'd Venmo'd. The texts from my parents asking for money, including the $3,500 request with no explanation. And one page from the will, personal details blacked out, just enough to show clearly that Eric was listed as sole beneficiary across every asset. I wrote one paragraph, * since my family decided to make this public, I'll answer publicly too. For 5 years, I helped pay for a house I was secretly being written out of. Make of that what you will. * The comments changed direction fast. A cousin messaged me privately, * I had no idea. * An aunt called me, actually called, which she never does, to say, * your parents told everyone Eric was helping with the house too. * That's the part that knocked the wind out of me. Not the will. Not the money. The fact that they'd been telling people Eric was contributing. They'd taken the story and rewritten it, and nobody had any reason to question it because I'd been too quiet, too private, too convinced that what happened inside a family stays inside a family. My parents called me a traitor. Ungrateful. Selfish. Word got back to me through the cousin. I sent one final message before I blocked the last few numbers I'd missed the first time around. Asterisk, I didn't destroy this family. I only stopped funding the lie. Asterisk, then I blocked them. That was a few months ago now. For the first time in years, my paycheck feels like mine. My weekends are quiet. My phone doesn't buzz with emergencies that were never really emergencies, just invoices dressed up as crises. The strangest part is that I don't feel guilty. I thought I would. I spent years worrying about what would happen if I ever stopped. I imagined myself lying awake, replaying the look on my mom's face, second-guessing everything. But the guilt never came. What came instead was something I didn't have a word for at first. I think the word is free. I don't know what's happening with the house. I don't know if Eric finally figured something out. I genuinely don't know, and this is the part that still surprises me, I genuinely don't care. Because I spent years trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided where I stood. I kept showing up thinking eventually they'd see it. Eventually the math would become undeniable. Eventually they'd say, "Jake, we see you." They never did. So now I'm choosing myself instead. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like home. My brother told me the main table was for family only. Then he pointed me to a folding chair beside the trash can. I sat there for 2 hours while they laughed, toasted, and took photos, while they clinked glasses and called each other closest people, while they pretended I wasn't 11 feet away, holding a jacket I never got to take off. Then the bill came. $3,218. And suddenly, everyone remembered I was family. Let me go back. In my family, Mason was the star. I was the receipt. He got the applause. I got the payment reminders. That's not bitterness talking, that's just the math of 34 years. Mason is 2 years younger than me and has been the favorite since before either of us understood what that meant. I used to think I was imagining it. Then I got older and realized I wasn't imagining anything. I was just too close to see it clearly. I work in finance. I live alone, I pay my own bills, and I show up on time to things. By most measures, I'm fine. But fine is a strange word for a person who co-signed his brother's car loan, watched that brother stop making payments 6 months later, and then sat across from his parents while they explained, calmly, like it was obvious, that Mason was going through a lot right now. I paid the remaining balance on that loan. Nobody asked me to. But I knew they'd ask eventually, and somehow doing it first felt like control, even if it wasn't. Over the years I helped my parents with the mortgage twice, once during a rough stretch when my dad's hours got cut, once when my mom had a medical bill that snuck up on them. I canceled a trip to Spain, flights booked, hotel paid, because Mason called in a panic about something that turned out to be manageable and probably didn't need me there at all. I've never brought any of this up. My family's version of the story is that Eli is reliable. Responsible. A little too serious, maybe. Eli doesn't really like to have fun, my mom said once, laughing, at a family dinner. She wasn't being cruel. She just wasn't paying attention. I told myself it didn't bother me. It bothered me. Mason proposed to Brooke in March. She said yes, obviously. Brooke is kind and patient and somehow finds Mason charming, which I think says something generous about her capacity for hope. The family was thrilled. My mom cried. My dad bought champagne and opened it in the kitchen at 4 in the afternoon. About a week later, my mom called me. Eli, sweetheart. She always opens with sweetheart when she needs something. We want to do a proper dinner for Mason and Brooke. Something special. Could you just help us hold the reservation? Just a small thing. We'll pay you back. I knew "we'll pay you back" was decorative. It always is. But, she said small thing, and I thought, it's an engagement dinner. A real family moment. Maybe this time I'd actually get to be part of it instead of just enabling it. I said yes. What followed was not a small thing. I called 4 restaurants before finding one with a private rooftop available on the date that worked for Mason's schedule. I put down a $500 deposit on my card. I arranged flowers because my mom said fake ones look cheap. I ordered a bottle of champagne and wrote a card for Mason and Brooke myself, because no one else had thought to. I confirmed the head count twice. I sent the restaurant the dietary restrictions I'd collected by texting each family member individually. I told myself, this time it'll be different. It wasn't. I arrived at 7 on the dot, wearing a suit, carrying the champagne. The rooftop was genuinely beautiful, string lights, a jazz duo in the corner, the skyline sitting perfectly behind the whole setup. The kind of thing you'd see in a movie and think was unrealistic. Mason was already there, standing near the bar with Brooke's father. He saw me come in and smiled the way you smile at someone you forgot was coming. "Oh, hey. Glad you made it." I held up the champagne. He nodded like I was a delivery person who'd done well. Then he pointed. There was a folding chair, the kind that collapses, the kind from a storage closet, pushed against the wall beside a large trash receptacle. The rooftop maintenance bin, I think. It had a handle. "Main tables for family only," Mason said. "But, there's a spot for you right there." I heard someone laugh. I think they thought it was a bit. A brother thing. I looked at my mother first. Because, some part of me, some part that apparently still believed in last-minute miracles, was waiting for her to say Mason, stop it, Eli sits with us. She smiled, a little stiff, and looked down at her drink. My dad had turned toward the skyline like something out there suddenly required his attention. Brooke was talking to someone on her side of the family and hadn't fully clocked what was happening. She'd figure it out later. I stood there with the champagne in my hand. Then I walked to the chair and sat down. 2 hours. I sat there for 2 hours. No one came to tell me what I was eating. A waiter eventually approached and asked, cautiously, if I was part of the party. I said yes. He looked unsure. I didn't blame him. I wasn't sure either. At one point Mason stood up and gave a toast about the people closest to us. He made eye contact with nearly everyone at the main table. Then he sat down and put his arm around Brooke and everyone clapped. I still had my jacket on. I never took it off. I think somewhere in my body I understood that I might need to leave quickly, and I didn't want to have to go back for it. The bill came at 9:15. The waiter came to me, because I was the name on the reservation, because the deposit had come from my card, and asked, quietly, "Sir, should I run the same card for the final amount?" Mason didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, Eli's got it." I looked at the waiter. I looked at the bill. $3,218. 17, then I said, very calmly, "Not my table." The whole rooftop went about 2 seconds quieter. "Excuse me?" Mason said. I was told the table was for family only. I handed the check holder back to the waiter. "So this isn't my bill." "It was a joke," Mason said. "Come on, man. Lighten up. Funny how I'm only family when the bill arrives." Nobody said anything. My dad cleared his throat. "You already paid the deposit, Eli. You might as well just finish it." I looked at him for a moment. I thought about Spain. I thought about the car. I thought about the mortgage, and the medical bill, and the flowers I ordered that morning, and the card sitting on the table that I'd written by hand. "I paid the deposit," I said. "I booked the room. I arranged the flowers. I showed up on time with champagne and a card that I wrote myself because no one else had thought to. And after all of that, I spent the evening next to a trash can." I picked up my jacket. "So no, Dad. I'm not finishing anything. I'm stopping." I looked at Mason. "You wanted a family-only table. Let your family pay for it." Then I left. I took the stairs instead of the elevator because I needed the time. 11 floors. By the time I got to the street I was breathing normally again, which surprised me. I didn't feel like I was falling apart. I felt like something had finished. I walked to my car and sat in it for a while. Then I drove home. The text started around 10:30. My mom, * you embarrassed us. * my dad, * just apologize and move on. * Mason, * you messed things up with Brooke's family. Fix this. * I noticed that nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody asked why. Nobody said * we shouldn't have put you next to the trash can, that was wrong. * they just needed the mess cleaned up, and they decided I was the one to do it, the same way they always decided. I didn't reply to any of them. Brooke called me the next evening. I almost didn't answer. But, something about a call, instead of a text, felt different. So I picked up. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Did you actually pay for the deposit?" "Yes." "Did Mason tell you I offered to contribute?" "No." Another pause. "He told us you wanted to sit separately. That you were introverted and preferred it that way." I didn't say anything for a moment. "He said you liked feeling useful," she continued, and her voice had gone a little flat. "He said it in this fond way, like it was a personality trait. Like it was sweet." "It's not sweet," I said. "I know that now." She'd called the restaurant that morning. She'd seen the invoice. She knew what I'd paid, what I'd arranged, and what my seat had been. She told me that her father, Mr. Whitaker, who I'd met once at a family barbecue and found instantly likable, had been sitting close enough to the aisle to see the folding chair from the main table. He hadn't said anything that night. But, he'd said quite a lot to Brooke afterward. He said something that stuck with me, Brooke told me. He said, "If this is how they treat the man who paid for the room, how will they treat you when you stop being useful?" I didn't have an answer to that. Neither did she. A few days later, I went through the joint account that Mason and I had opened years ago for a shared expense that had long since resolved, but neither of us had ever officially closed it. There was a small amount of my money still sitting in there. I transferred it out and closed the line. Mason called me 20 minutes later. "My card's bouncing." "I know." "I closed the account." "You can't just do that." "I can." "I did." A pause. Then, "This is insane. You're doing this because you're jealous." I actually laughed a little at that. Not meanly, genuinely, because the word was so wrong. "I'm not jealous, Mason. I'm tired. There's a real difference." He hung up. 3 weeks later, I got an email from Brooke. She'd talked to the restaurant herself, double-checked the invoice, gone through the whole evening again with her parents. She'd also, apparently, started remembering other things, comments Mason had made over the years, the way he talked about me, the easy way he'd assumed I'd handle everything. She said she tried to find a way to explain it away. She couldn't. The engagement was off. She didn't write much. But, she ended with 2 sentences that I've read maybe a dozen times since. * It wasn't the dinner. It was what the dinner revealed. * My Aunt Karen called me a week after that. She's my mom's older sister and has always existed at a slight distance from the family's official version of events, which means she notices things. "About time," she said, when I told her what happened. "About time what?" "About time someone shook the tree." I told her I hadn't meant to shake anything. I just stopped paying. "Eli." Her voice went serious. "Your parents didn't raise you to be strong. They trained you to be useful. Those aren't the same thing." I didn't say anything. "The question now," she said, "is what you actually want." My mom came over on a Sunday about a month later. She brought lasagna, which is what she brings when she doesn't know what to say. She stood in my doorway for a second before I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, both hands around her coffee mug, and said, "I owe you an apology." "Just one," I said. She almost smiled. Then she didn't. You never asked for anything, she said. So we convinced ourselves you didn't need anything. It was easier than paying attention. I looked at her. She meant it. I could tell. Thank you for saying it, I told her. That's all I said. I didn't tell her everything was fine. I didn't tell her we were good. I didn't open my arms and let it all go back to normal. I just accepted the sentence for what it was, honest, and overdue, and we sat there and ate lasagna and talked about other things. It's a start. Maybe. I don't know what it grows into. I still don't know if I'll go to Thanksgiving. I don't know if Mason will ever apologize, genuinely, not the kind of apology that's really just a request to move on. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand what they built, over all those years, by deciding I was the dependable one and leaving it at that. But, here's what I know. I didn't ruin that dinner. I just stopped paying for a seat I was never actually allowed to have. For years I thought being useful would eventually translate into being loved. I thought if I kept showing up, kept covering things, kept being the one who handled it, someday the table would have room for me. Someday they'd look over and say this guy, right here, this is someone we take care of. The folding chair was the clearest answer I ever got. So no, I didn't pay the bill that night. I paid enough already. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not standing at the edge of someone else's table waiting for them to scoot over. I built my own. It seats exactly as many people as I want it to. And every chair has 4 legs. My parents told me I would end up living on the streets. My sister laughed and said maybe, if I got desperate enough, she could find something for me at her firm. Fetching coffee, probably. Something small. 3 months later, I bought the property development project that my father had staked his retirement on. And by the time they figured out what had happened, really figured it out, not just saw the paperwork but understood it, they were sitting across the table from the man they spent a decade calling a failure. I let them order dessert first. My name is Adrian. I'm 32. And for most of my adult life, I was the embarrassing one. I dropped out of college at 18 to build an online business. Not because I hated school, not because of some dramatic philosophical awakening, I just saw something that could work and decided to go after it while it was still there. My parents did not see it that way. My father called it running away from real life. My mother cried, which she does when words feel insufficient. My sister Lily, who was already 3 years into a pre-law track and heading for exactly the life my parents had planned for her, said nothing at the time. She filed it away. Lily is strategic like that. I spent the next 14 years building quietly. The business started small, consulting, then digital products, then a content platform that grew faster than I expected. I reinvested almost everything. I kept my life simple, my expenses low, my profile non-existent. I didn't post about it. I didn't explain it to people at family dinners. Every Christmas I would come home and my father would ask, carefully, still doing the online thing, and I would say yes and he would nod like a man who has accepted a chronic condition in someone he loves. My mother had a cleaner version of events that she told at church. Adrian is finding himself. Still figuring things out. Such a creative spirit. I didn't correct her. There was no version of the truth she would have believed anyway. Lily, by that point, had become exactly what my parents wanted to hang on the wall. Corporate lawyer at a firm with a long name. A condo in the city, a car that made a statement, a LinkedIn profile that looked like a magazine spread. She came to family dinners with the posture of someone being photographed. She spoke about her cases the way people speak on panels. She was genuinely intelligent, I want to be clear about that, but she had also learned, early, that in our family the appearance of success mattered as much as success itself. Maybe more. She said things like, "It's never too late to get a real job, Adrian," with a smile that made it sound kind. What I didn't know until later was that the condo was leveraged, the car was financed, and my parents had been quietly helping her more than anyone discussed. The image was pristine. The foundation was not. But, that came later. What I knew then was this: to my family, Lily was the investment. I was the spare account. The one you don't think about until you need something out of it. The night everything changed, it was raining. My mother called and asked me to come over. She said it was important, that they needed to talk. She used a tone I recognized, warm on top, something else underneath. I drove over thinking maybe my dad's health, or something with the house. Something real. When I walked in, my father was pacing the living room. My mother was standing near the fireplace with her arms crossed. Lily was on the couch with a glass of wine, and the second I saw her there I understood. This wasn't a family emergency. This was a meeting. My father started. "You're 32 years old. This online nonsense has gone on long enough." I looked at him. "Okay. My mother, we can't keep enabling you." "Enabling me," I said. "I've never asked you for money." Lily smiled into her glass. "Come on, Adrian. Nobody actually believes that internet thing pays your bills." There was a version of that moment where I pull out my phone and show them the accounts. The numbers. The company filings. The properties. I had all of it. I could have ended the conversation in 60 seconds. But I looked at their faces, my father's jaw, my mother's folded arms, Lily's patient little smile, and I realized something. I didn't want to convince them anymore. I had wanted to for years without knowing it. I'd built half my life around a quiet hope that one day the evidence would be undeniable. That they'd have to see it. But that's not how it works with people like this. They didn't distrust me because the evidence was lacking. They needed me to fail. Because, if I had actually built something real, quietly, without their approval or their help, then they had been wrong about me for 14 years. And that was a debt they weren't willing to pay. My father said, "Go live in the streets if that's what it comes to. Maybe that will finally wake you up." I picked up my keys. I said, "Okay, Dad," and walked out. The story started within a week. I found out through Jacob, an old friend who had stayed loosely connected to my family's social world. He texted me one evening, "Heard you're going through a rough patch. Your mom's been talking to people at church. Said you might be sleeping in your car." I read the message twice. They weren't worried I had hit rock bottom. They were excited to tell people I had. My mother, apparently, described it as humbling. A lesson Adrian needed. She told her friends she hoped I would come to my senses soon. Lily told someone we both knew in college that she'd offered me a position at the firm, entry level, but something, and that I'd refused out of pride. I had received no such offer. But, the story was already moving, and stories like that don't need to be true. They just need to be convenient. About 3 weeks after the night in the living room, I got an email from my bank. It was a transaction alert on an account I had nearly forgotten existed, a savings account opened when I was 16, a joint account my mother had co-signed because I was a minor. I had never closed it because there was nothing significant in it, and I had simply stopped thinking about it. Old money, sitting still. The alert was for a withdrawal. A cashier's check. $14,200. I called the bank. The representative was apologetic and very careful with her words. The co-account holder had presented identification and requested a cashier's check, citing a family emergency. Everything was technically within her legal access. There was nothing irregular, from the bank's perspective. Jacob texted me 2 days later. "Did you know Lily just got a new SUV? She said it was a family gift." That evening, my mother sent me a message. "Hope you're not upset about the savings account. It was just sitting there, and your sister needed help. Family comes first." I read that sentence several times. Family comes first. While spending my money on my sister. The part that stayed with me wasn't the theft, and it was theft, whatever the legal technicality said. It was the logic underneath it. They didn't think they were taking from me. They thought they were correcting an imbalance. In their minds, Lily was the one who deserved support. I deserved to be useful. And whatever was mine was really just a resource waiting to be redistributed towards someone more deserving. I sat with that for a long time. Then I got to work. I closed every account they had any access to, however indirect. I spoke to my lawyer. I moved assets into structures that were clean and sealed and entirely mine. I documented everything, the withdrawal, the text message, all of it. Not because I had a plan. Just because I was done being careless. And while I was doing all of that, I started paying attention to my father's finances. He wasn't hard to read, once I looked. He had been talking for 2 years about a property development project, townhomes on the east side of the city, a partnership with 2 other investors, the kind of thing he described at family dinners as his legacy. He had put in more than I knew. More, I suspected, than was wise. Lily's debts were easier to find. She was not as wealthy as she appeared. The condo was mortgaged to the edge. The car was financed. The firm job paid well, but she spent close to everything, and some of the gaps had been quietly filled by my parents in ways nobody talked about directly. I didn't do anything with any of this information. Not yet. I just watched, and waited, and let them keep moving. The magazine piece wasn't something I pursued. A journalist reached out through my company's contact page. She was writing about founders who had built significant things outside the traditional credentialing path, people who had been dismissed early and succeeded anyway. She had done her research. She already knew more about my business than most people I'd met in person. I agreed to the interview. We spoke for 2 hours. I told her the truth, which was the story of someone who built something real in silence for 14 years while his family told everyone he was a cautionary tale. The piece ran on the cover. Asterisk from doubt to dominance, the self-made founder no one believed in. Asterisk my mother texted me the morning it came out. Asterisk Adrian, we saw the magazine. We had no idea. We're so proud of you. Asterisk proud. I looked at that word for a long time. It felt cheaper than every insult they'd ever handed me. Because, it cost them nothing. It required no accounting, no acknowledgement of what they'd said or done or taken. Just a pivot, smooth and seamless, from one version of the story to another. Yesterday I was the failure they worried about in public. Today I was the son they were proud of. I didn't reply. The development project defaulted 2 months later. My father's partners had overleveraged, the timeline had slipped badly, and the bank called the loan. The project went into distress. A real estate investment group I had been working with for several years moved quickly. This was the kind of asset they specialized in, distressed properties with real underlying value, and I came in alongside them with a capital contribution that gave me meaningful ownership in the acquisition. I want to be clear about how this happened. I didn't engineer it. I didn't call anyone and pressure them. I didn't manipulate the timeline or accelerate the default. The project was failing on its own long before I was involved. I simply saw the opportunity and moved when it was available. I didn't set the fire. I bought the land after they burned it down. I invited my parents and Lily to dinner on a Thursday evening. I chose a restaurant that required a reservation and had tablecloths. Not the most expensive place in the city, just enough to signal that I was comfortable somewhere they would have found impressive. The kind of place where my father would pick up the menu and check the prices before deciding what to order. They arrived differently than they used to. My mother hugged me at the door, a real hug, both arms. My father shook my hand like we were colleagues. Lily complimented my jacket. They were warm in the careful way of people who have recently revised their opinion of someone and are not sure how to account for the earlier version. We ordered. We talked about nothing important for 30 minutes. It was almost normal, the way things might have been if they'd been different people. Then I slid the folder across the table. My father picked it up. He's slow with paperwork, always has been. He reads every line before reacting. I watched him move through the documents. Watched the moment his expression changed. Not dramatically. Just a tightening around the eyes. "This is our property," he said. "It was," I said. My mother looked between us. "What does that mean?" "Adrian, what is this?" It means I own it now. The project defaulted. I came in with the acquisition. The table went quiet in that particular way that happens when something real enters a conversation that has been full of nothing real. My mother said, "How could you do this to us?" I looked at her. "The same way you walked into my bank account and took my money. Except I didn't have to lie to do it." She opened her mouth. Closed it. I turned to Lily. She was sitting very still, her wine untouched. "I hope the SUV was worth it," I said. Quietly. Not cruelly, I think. Just factually. She didn't say anything. My father tried one more time. He straightened his shoulders and used the voice he uses when he wants to sound reasonable and final. "Adrian, this is family money. You know what that project meant to us." "I know," I said. "I also know what the account meant to me." I folded my hands on the table. "You told everyone I'd end up on the streets. Turns out I didn't. I bought the block. I let that sit. Then I picked up the menu again and asked if anyone wanted to order dessert. The months after were quieter than I expected. My father lost the project, not into nothing. The townhome still got built eventually, just under different ownership, and the loss cost him more than money. The story he had been telling for years, about his investment, his legacy, the thing he was building, was gone. The friends he had mentioned it to would notice. Lily sold the condo. Downsized. The SUV was returned, or traded, I'm not certain. She stopped posting about her lifestyle with the same frequency. My mother emailed me once, a few weeks after the dinner. Asterisk, "You've changed, Adrian." Asterisk, I read it twice. Closed my laptop. She was wrong. I hadn't changed. I was the same person I had been at 18, at 25, at every family dinner where I sat quietly while they told the room who I was. I had simply stopped performing the role they wrote for me. That's not change. That's just stopping. The townhome sold out in 8 months. Families moved in. There are kids on the sidewalks now, a little park at the end of the block, exactly the thing my father used to describe when he talked about the project over holiday meals. The development became what he always said it would. His name just isn't on it anymore. I don't know what my family tells people now. I don't ask. I don't have a relationship with my parents in any real sense. We exist in the same city, we share a last name, and occasionally I get a message that I reply to or don't depending on how I feel that day. Lily I haven't spoken to directly since the dinner. The best part, I've realized, isn't that they lost. It isn't the project or the magazine or the money or any of it. The best part is that I don't need them to admit anything. I used to. For years I carried this low, quiet hunger for the moment they would finally say it, that they were wrong, that they saw me, that they were sorry. I thought that moment would feel like something. Now I don't need it. And losing the need for it is worth more than anything else I've built. They told everyone I'd end up living on the streets. In a way, they were right. I ended up there eventually. I just own the whole block. My parents kicked me out the night I turned 18. They sat me down in the living room and told me I wasn't their responsibility anymore. My mother said it would teach me independence. My father said it like he was reading from a lease termination, calm, final, done. I left with a backpack and 2 changes of clothes. That night I slept in my car. Almost 10 years passed. They didn't call to ask where I was sleeping. They didn't ask how I was eating. They existed in my life the way a bruise exists, not always visible, but always there when you press on it. Then my grandfather died. And at the will reading, the lawyer read my name as the sole beneficiary of a $3.5 million estate. For the first time in nearly a decade, my parents looked at me like I was family. Not because they loved me. Because they wanted what I had. Let me go back. I'm Oliver. I'm 27. And for as long as I can remember, I was the wrong kind of son. My parents cared about image in the specific, exhausting way that people do when they've built an identity around what the neighbors think. My father wanted a son who made him look good at dinner parties. My mother wanted children she could describe to her friends at church. Neither of them got that from me. I was quiet, sensitive, they called it soft, and I didn't fit the shape they had in mind. My sister Claire fitted perfectly. She was 3 years older, and from the beginning she was the one they pointed to. Good grades, right friends, right school, right everything. They bought her a car when she turned 17. They paid her entire tuition without a conversation about it. When Claire was unkind, and she could be deeply unkind, especially to me, they called it confidence. When I was upset about it, they called me too sensitive. Claire was rewarded for existing. I was expected to earn the right to be tolerated. I never quite managed it, apparently. My 18th birthday was a Saturday. I remember thinking, that morning, that maybe it would be a good day. 18 felt like something. Like a door. They called me downstairs after dinner. No cake. My father was standing near the window with his hands in his pockets. My mother was at the kitchen table, not quite looking at me. He said, "You're 18 now. You're not our responsibility anymore." I stood there. I thought I had misheard. My mother said, "This will teach you independence, Oliver. It's better this way." I looked at her for a moment. I waited for something else, a but, a softening, a sign that this was the beginning of a harder conversation rather than the end of a short one. It was the end. I went upstairs and packed what I could fit in a backpack. 2 pairs of jeans. Some shirts. My phone charger. A book I hadn't finished. I came back down and my father was watching television. My mother had gone to another room. I walked out and closed the door behind me. That night, parked behind a shopping center 3 miles from the house, I scrolled through my phone and saw Claire had posted a photo from her sorority house. New laptop open on the desk. Tagged my dad in the caption. He had commented a heart. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and stared at the ceiling of the car for a long time. The person who found me was my grandfather. Not right away, it took a few weeks before I told him what had happened. I'd been ashamed, which is its own kind of cruelty, being ashamed of something someone else did to you. But, eventually I showed up at his house on a Sunday afternoon and he took one look at my face and said, "Come in. I'll make coffee." His coffee was always too strong. His toast was always slightly burnt. His kitchen was small and the chair by the window wobbled if you leaned back too far. I ate there every Sunday for the next 2 years, and it was the safest place I knew. Grandpa Harold didn't make a big speech about my parents. He didn't tell me they were wrong, or promise it would get better, or offer advice I hadn't asked for. He just fed me and asked about my week and listened like what I said mattered. Like I mattered. As a person, not as a reflection of anyone else's choices. Once, near the end of one of those Sundays, he looked at me over his coffee cup and said, "Oliver, don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. You decide that." He went back to his toast. I didn't say anything. But I remembered it. He died in February, 9 years after that first Sunday. I sat with him in the hospital the last 3 nights. I read to him when he was awake and stayed quiet when he wasn't. The nurses knew my name. My parents visited once, briefly, and Claire sent flowers from out of town. When the lawyer called to tell me about the will reading, I assumed I'd be receiving something small. A watch, maybe. Some of his books. A piece of furniture I'd always liked. I went to the office expecting to be there for 20 minutes. My parents were already seated when I arrived. My mother was wearing a dark blazer I'd only seen at church. My father had the posture of someone waiting for something they'd already decided they deserved. Claire was next to them, and she gave me a look when I walked in, not hostile, exactly, just measuring. Like she was doing math. The lawyer began. He went through the preliminary language, the dates, the formal declarations. My parents were nodding slightly, the way you nod when you're following along and expecting confirmation of something you already believe. Then he said my name. The entire estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, is left to Oliver Montgomery. The room changed. Not loudly. There was no shouting, no scene. But, the air in it changed, the way pressure changes before a storm. My mother's face went very still. My father stopped nodding. Claire's expression reset. I watched it happen, watched the calculation disappear and be replaced by something flat and careful. I didn't hear the number. Not really. Not at first. What I heard was my grandfather saying, "*I saw you. *" In the parking lot afterward, before I could reach my car, my father fell into step beside me. "Oliver," he said, his voice calm and reasonable, the business voice. "You're going to need guidance with something like this. This is complicated. There are tax considerations, investment questions. I'll find advisors," I said. "We can help you find the right people." My mother appeared on my other side. "You don't want to make mistakes, sweetheart. This kind of money can disappear very fast if you don't handle it correctly." Sweetheart. That word from her mouth, in that parking lot, after 9 years. Claire said, from a few steps behind, "Think about it, Oliver. You don't want to end up like those lottery winners who lose everything." I looked at the three of them, this little formation they'd made, surrounding me, gentle and concerned, and I understood exactly what was happening. "I'll think about it," I said. And I got in my car. That evening there was a knock at my apartment door. Claire. She came in and looked around the apartment with the expression people wear when they're deciding not to say what they're thinking. She sat on the couch and crossed her legs and said, "Cute place." Then she said, "Now that things have changed, you'll want people around you who understand this world. Dad could manage the investments. Mom could handle the social side, introductions, the right circles. I have legal contacts who could oversee the estate." "And what would I do?" I asked. She smiled. "You'd sign off on things. You'd be the owner. You just wouldn't have to worry about the details. I just need to hand everything over. We'd be protecting you." I thought about the backpack. The shopping center parking lot. The Sunday coffees. I thought about 9 years of silence. "No," I said. Her smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "Money belongs in the hands of people who know how to use it," she said. "Good night, Claire." She left. The call from the lawyer came 8 days later. Someone had contacted the bank managing the estate, claiming to represent me. They had used information about the account, specific enough to be convincing, wrong enough to be caught. The bank had flagged it and called the lawyer immediately. I sat down when he told me. When they threw me out, they took my home. When they spread stories about me after the will reading, they tried to take my name. Now they were reaching for the last thing my grandfather had trusted me with. I thanked the lawyer and hung up. Then I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, doing nothing. When I was done sitting, I got up and started making a list. I documented everything. The bank attempt. The texts my mother had sent with suggestions that I let Dad handle the accounts. The voicemail from Claire about the legal contacts. I saved it all in a folder and made copies. I hired a financial advisor, not the contacts Claire had mentioned, someone I found independently, who came recommended by a colleague from work. I met with a separate attorney. I went through the estate documents carefully, line by line, and learned what I didn't understand. I also stayed quiet in public. I didn't post about the inheritance. I didn't respond to the stories I heard were circulating, that I had manipulated a dying man, that I had been at the hospital to influence him, that I wasn't capable of managing anything of real value. I heard those things third-hand, through people who mentioned them awkwardly and then looked at their shoes. I just kept moving. I bought a modest house. Not big, not flashy, something solid, something mine. I kept going to work. I got a promotion. I set up a charitable fund in my grandfather's name, small to start, focused on the community he'd spent his life in. I didn't want to look rich. I wanted to become steady. About 4 months after the will reading, I got a call from a man named Daniel Grant. He was a retired attorney, he said, and he'd been a close friend of my grandfather's for decades. He had something to give me, something Harold had left with him specifically, to be passed on once the estate was settled. We met at a diner. He brought a notebook. Old, cloth-covered, filled with my grandfather's handwriting. And a sealed letter. "Harold knew your parents might make a move," Daniel said, setting his coffee down. He wasn't naive about who they were. He planned for it. He explained, the will contained protective clauses. If anyone attempted to challenge Oliver's competency, or to fraudulently access the estate, those attempts would themselves constitute grounds for civil action, and would serve as evidence that the original bequest was sound and warranted. My grandfather had written, in the notebook, asterisk if they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Oliver. Asterisk he had known. He had known all of it, and he had built the answer into the documents quietly, the same way he had done everything, without announcement, without drama, just careful and thorough and already 3 steps ahead. Daniel pushed the notebook across the table. He also said to tell you he was proud of you. He told me that more than once. I looked down at the notebook. I didn't trust my voice for a moment. Grandpa hadn't just left me money. He had left me proof that I was never crazy for feeling unloved. That the thing I had felt my whole childhood, being seen by the wrong people, invisible to the right ones, had been real. He had seen it too. He just couldn't fix it while he was alive. This was the closest he could get. 3 weeks later, my parents filed a petition. They argued that I lacked the experience and emotional stability to manage an estate of that size. They used the word competency. They submitted documents suggesting I was impulsive, financially naive, easily influenced. They requested the court appoint an administrator, themselves, effectively, to oversee the assets. I sat in the courtroom in a suit I had bought with my own paycheck, 2 years before any of this happened, and I listened to them describe me. Their attorney was organized and confident. He laid out a version of me that I barely recognized, fragile, reckless, clearly in over his head. He talked about my lack of formal education in finance, my modest income before the inheritance, my emotional history with the family. He made it sound like concern. Then Daniel stood up. He submitted the bank records from the attempted account access. He submitted the texts and voicemails requesting control of the estate. He submitted Claire's messages. He submitted the notebook. He read one line from it aloud, slowly, asterisk, if they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Oliver. Asterisk the courtroom was very quiet. The judge reviewed the materials for a long time. Then she looked at my parents' attorney and asked several questions I won't detail here. Then she looked at me. She denied the petition. She also issued a formal warning against further interference with the estate. My mother turned toward me as we stood to leave. She said, "We only did this for you." I looked at her, really looked at her, the way I hadn't in years, the way you stop doing when looking hurts too much. "No," I said. "You did it for yourselves. Grandpa knew it. And now everyone else does too." I picked up my jacket and walked out. The months after were quieter than the months before. My parents' reputation in the community they cared so much about took a certain kind of damage, not the loud, obvious kind, but the quiet kind that comes from people having read the court documents and drawn their own conclusions. My father lost a business partnership he'd been building. My mother's social circle contracted, subtly, the way those things do when people start revising their opinion of someone. Claire, I don't know. I don't keep track of Claire anymore. I think about what I expected to feel, after everything. I think I expected some form of triumph. The clean satisfaction of a problem resolved, a wrong corrected. What I actually felt was tired. Tired and, underneath it, slowly, something lighter. Not happiness exactly. More like the absence of weight. The sweetest part wasn't watching them lose. It was realizing I didn't need them to lose for me to be free. A few weeks ago I drove past the old house. I don't know what pulled me in that direction, I hadn't planned it. I just found myself on that street at dusk, idling across from the house I'd grown up in. It looked a little smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling near the garage. I sat there and tried to feel something large about it. Some final reckoning. I didn't. I just thought about Sundays. 2 strong coffee and burnt toast and a wobbling chair and a man who listened to me like what I said mattered. I thought about a notebook in a diner, and a letter, and a voice that was gone but had still, somehow, found a way to reach me. I rolled down the window. The air was cold. I decide what I'm worth, I said. To myself, or to him, or to whoever was listening. Then I drove away. Not because I was running. Because there was nothing left there for me to chase.